Hello and welcome back to the News Media Hands channel.
News alert, we have a jury.
But the day didn't start that easily for Trump and his lawyers as they were hit by fresh accusations of violating the gag order and the dismissal of a juror for safety reason. Prosecutors accused Trump of violating a gag order 7 more times. They have already filed a previous request to sanction him for breaking the order, and a hearing regarding the issue is scheduled for next week. Meanwhile, the juror's dismissal has prompted Merchant to rebuke reporters covering the case, as they revealed too much about the physical descriptions of the jurors.
This morning, a seated juror in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial has been excused as prosecutors asked the judge to sanction Trump. For Trump's hush money trial, attorneys need to pick 12 more jurors before the trial can proceed. Prosecutors will want to use Trump's past legal run-ins against him if he testifies. In a court filing Wednesday, prosecutors say they will ask Trump about the recent verdict in the civil fraud trial, including what they say was false testimony. Other items prosecutors say they plan to question Trump about include the defamation case brought on by E. Jean Carroll. Another topic will be his namesake company's 2022 tax fraud conviction, his lawsuit against Hillary Clinton that was dismissed for being frivolous and in bad faith was also listed in the court filing. Judge Merchant plans to hold what's called a Sandoval hearing, which will determine the scope of what prosecutors can ask Trump if he takes the stand. The judge says that hearing can happen as early as Friday, but only if they can get all of the remaining jurors seated.
In a flagrant violation of both a warning that Trump received from the judge in the courtroom and from the terms of his own gag order, we now have definitive proof that Trump has intimidated a juror at his own criminal trial. What we began today with 7 jurors. One of those jurors, an oncology nurse, asked to be dismissed after she expressed concern over aspects of her identity being made public. So that we're clear, a juror in the United States of America is afraid of being harassed or hurt or worse by virtue of participating in a trial regarding Trump's campaign finance violations. If that is not an indictment of the danger posed by this guy, I don't know what is.
It was a day of pinballing decisions on this jury, John. You had the day begin with 7, then it went down to 5 because of one nurse said she just felt her identity could be exposed already. Friends and family were pushing things to her on her phone via text message and social media. You had someone else who was alleged to have ripped down conservative posters years ago and had been arrested for that. Someone with the same name as someone arrested for that was on the jury. So you went from 7 to 5, but then quickly Judge Juan Merchan here in this New York criminal case decided to move swiftly, and he got the jury done, working with the prosecution and the defense team. It was a complicated process, but it's so evident here at the end of the day that this judge wants to begin opening statements by Monday.
Going in today, 7 jurors had been seated. That was until this morning. The judge excused jurors number 2 and 4 for different reasons.
But just within the last hour, we learned a jury of 7 men and 5 women have now been fully sat. Our lawyers are now moving on to choosing alternates.
By late this afternoon, they were able to backfill the 2 jury seats they lost this morning when a judge had to excuse 2 jurors. As you mentioned, they have now selected 12 jurors and at least 1 alternate. They're aiming to pick 6 alternates altogether. They'll resume tomorrow because court has adjourned for the day. As for the jobs, the occupations of these jurors who were selected this afternoon, they range from security engineer to physical therapist, speech therapist, and investment banker.
The case with a crime the Democrats can't even name is now in the hands of 12 men and women from Manhattan. But it didn't come easy. One juror dropped out because she couldn't be impartial. Another juror was forced out for lying, and the DA wants to sanction Trump for publicizing it. We'll get to these new jurors in a second, but their profiles are just as ridiculous as the first batch. No bodega visit today. Instead, after court was adjourned, Trump emerged and urged the judge to crank the thermostat.
I'm sitting here for days now, from morning till night, in that freezing room, freezing. Everybody was freezing.
Out these 7 jurors, these jurors will be on the case. So far we know 4 males, 3 females. Let's take a quick look at what we have for juror number 1. Juror number 1 will be the foreperson. No magic powers associated with the foreperson. That's the person who generally communicates on behalf of the jury with the judge and tends to lead the deliberations in the room. What jumped out at me, there's nothing remarkable in the bio, but this is a person who said he watches both Fox News and MSNBC. That's an interesting combination. If I'm Trump and I got anyone who watches any Fox News, I want a chance that that person is going to go on the jury. But I have to note this. In New York, I pick juries in New York, people sometimes confuse Fox News with the local Fox 5. And the jury form does not separate those two. So could be that he was actually talking about the local news, which is really not partisan. Let's go to juror number 2. Juror number 2 is an nurse. In New York, you get a lot of medical professionals, a lot of hospitals there. In my experience, medical professionals tend to be technical. They're capable of separating facts from emotion. And usually, prosecutors want that. It really depends on how strongly you feel that your case is based when you get down to the technical elements of it. So you're always going to have nurses, doctors, medical professionals. A native New Yorker watches CNN.
The day started off badly for Bragg. Juror number 2, the unmarried nurse, dropped out because her friends asked her if she was one of the Trump jurors. She said she couldn't take the pressure and couldn't be fair to the former president. Juror number 4, the Puerto Rican grandfather who found Trump fascinating and mysterious, ended up being a stealth juror. He lied on his jury form about his criminal record. It turns out he was arrested for vandalizing Republican lawn signs. He was working with Democrat Mayor David Dinkins' staff. So the judge booted the undercover grandfather. By the way, all of the information about these jurors comes from reporters in the room. The same things I'm reporting, so is the Washington Post, CNN, Politico. The media also knows Trump's lawyers have caught prospective jurors being sneaky. Jurors fill out forms that say they're not biased. I've never done this or that, and Trump's team keeps catching them. They've uncovered jurors posting celebrations of Trump losing, videos of Trump that say, "I'm dumb as F," posting, "Lock him up." The media knows this because their own reporters reported it. Even the jurors who told the court they can totally be unbiased when they're dismissed run to the media and blast Trump.
Did you say you could be unbiased, though?
I did.
Can you share your opinion of the former president and why you felt that you could be unbiased?
I'm not a fan. I think his handling of COVID-19 was abysmal. I also have a sister who's adopted from China, and the comments he made about China when he was running for president.
Juror number 3. Okay, juror number 3. Now, this is interesting, Wolf. This is a lawyer. And typically, the rule of thumb is lawyers don't like lawyers on their juries. At the prosecutor's office, we almost automatically got rid of any lawyer. But it's also hard to do because you do have a lot of lawyers in Manhattan. The concern is that a lawyer might just take over the jury. They might say, listen, I'm a lawyer. Forget about the judge. I know what's going to happen here. But it's hard to seat a jury with no lawyers on it. Interestingly, he does read the Wall Street Journal, which has been quite critical of this particular case in its editorial pages. So juror number 3, I think, would please me from Trump's point of view.
Another dismissed juror says this jury cannot be impartial.
What happened? Why were you dismissed?
Because I couldn't be impartial.
Do you feel like the people that you were speaking with in that jury room that you sat with all day on Tuesday, that they can put together a fair and impartial jury because of that sense of duty? Do you think that's possible?
I'm not sure about that.
One person took it to an entirely new and irresponsible level. Both Tuesday and Wednesday nights, devoting entire segments to airing all the available information about the jurors and his opinion on whether they are suspect. And of course, the only acceptable jurors are ones sympathetic to Donald Trump, jurors who don't believe no one's above the law. So then the defendant himself went on to actually amplify Fox's coverage, posting a quote about undercover liberal activists lying to the judge to get on the jury. There's no evidence that's true. The post appears to be a flagrant violation of Trump's gag order, which prohibits him from commenting on jurors. And so this morning, Judge Merchan told the court that the original juror number 2, the one that scares Mr. Waters, called and conveyed that she had concerns about her identity becoming public, said that friends and family have already inquired about whether she is a juror. The juror added that given these outside influences, she was concerned about her ability to be fair and impartial. Understandably, after all that information and those opinions about her got out into the world, she found herself feeling scared, targeted, and exposed. Judge Merchan agreed to excuse juror number 2 from duty. Again, there's no doubt about what happened here. This is part of a long, consistent, and persistent pattern in which Donald Trump encourages and the MAGA world pursues the harassment, intimidation of people who cross the former president. It has happened A ton. It's happened to several key figures in his legal cases. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has received all sorts of death threats, as has Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis and Judge Arthur Engoron. Remember the bomb threat called into his house, who oversaw the civil fraud case in New York? It's the same thing we saw happen to Georgia election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who were dragged through the mud and were
12 jurors have now been seated. The court still has to determine 6 alternates for this case, and alternates will end up deciding the case should it come to that. So when you hear 7 men, 5 women, does that make any difference to you as you're slicing and dicing who would be beneficial to one side or the other?
Each case presents its own different uniqueness, and sometimes race plays a factor, sometimes gender plays a factor, sometimes employment. I would think in a case like this, gender doesn't really matter. I would be more interested in an employment background and what parts of Manhattan they're in. I'll give you an example. We know that there are 2 attorneys on this jury. If they were 2 public defenders or 2 white-collar attorneys, both are attorneys, but we can probably surmise 2 very different opinions. And so I think employment matters way more than gender.
Now, prosecutors have argued that the former president has violated his gag order multiple times. There's going to be a hearing on that next week. What can you tell us about what Trump is accused of saying to violate that order?
It's a bit of a complicated question right now for the Trump legal team because they know he has a gag order. He's not allowed to talk about jurors because that could intimidate the jurors. He is allowed to talk about the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. He is allowed to talk about the judge in this case, Juan Merchan. But the question really is about social media. What can he do on True Social? Is he allowed to repost or retweet or whatever you want to call it, posts that maybe allude to jurors or allude to witnesses? Trump, of course, has raged about the key witness in this case, Michael Cohen, his former fixer, many times. And the judge is going to try to deliberate with the prosecution and the Trump legal team. What is the scope of what he can say? Of course, Trump says he can say almost anything he wants because he's a candidate running for federal office.
Thanks for watching. If you like it, comment and hit the like and share buttons. Subscribe for future videos.